too hot to wear this sweatshirt. Can you hear the trucks outside? Hopefully I stay in focus during this video. Usually I use auto and then it'll go in and out of focus the whole video and it bugs the shit out of me, so I'm using manual. Let's hope I just stay where it's in focus. I did not have particularly high expectations going in, to be perfectly honest. Like, I wanted to like it because I like both of those characters, but even before the show premiered, they had the promotional stuff where they revealed that the villain was going to be a group called the Flag Smashers, and their sort of symbol, like on their masks, was a red handprint on the face, which also happens to be the symbol used for awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So I'm not like saying that Marvel, you know, did this on purpose with nefarious reasoning to, you know, pull the attention away, but they sure did do it. Also, the Flag Smashers were bad because they wanted unity in a world without borders. And it's like, okay, so when doctors don't have borders, it's a good thing, but everyone else, you're a supervillain. I get that Captain America's symbol is representative of the flag of the United States of America, so these people being Flag Smashers are the antithesis of that. But what if these people are right? Does that mean Captain America is wrong? The show actually does allow for some nuance on that. Sam Wilson, who is of course destined to be the new Captain America, doesn't really think that they're evil. But there are things that are told through dialogue, and then there's things that are told through the narrative and the storytelling. The show basically opens up with military propaganda, which is no surprise. That's been Marvel's MO since they kicked things off with Iron Man. And also the Pentagon has to approve all depictions of the military to make sure that it's being shown in a positive light. Did you know that? It's not a conspiracy theory. You can look it up. They don't hide it. So show gets rolling, Sam is like thanked by some locals and he's like, all in a day's work, citizens, and then Torres is like, oh my god, you speak Arabic? You're so cool. And then he gives some exposition on the Flag Smashers. First time we actually see the Flag Smashers in action is at one of their flash mobs where they're robbing a Swiss bank. And the way that we know they're supervillains is because one of them intervenes on police brutality. Intervenes on police brutality. Okay, yeah, so one of them sees a cop beating up a random person with like a nightstick, and he goes and he kicks the cop and sends him flying, and that's how we know that they're supervillains. Because they intervene in police brutality? Well, I mean, we know if you fight violence with violence, you're just as bad. That's why all the Avengers are pacifists. Honestly, for as topical as the show tried to be, that moment just felt really tone deaf. So far, the Flag Smashers seem like people I'd want to hang out with. At one point, some of the characters are trying to find the leader, a young woman named Carly Morgenthau, and no one's willing to give her up. And one of the characters actually says, she's giving displaced people shelter and medicine. That kind of thing creates loyalty. And his point was not she's giving displaced people shelter and medicine, maybe she's not that bad. His thing was, it's going to make her harder for us to find and arrest. At the beginning of the series, Sam donates the shield to the Smithsonian, which, side note, did Steve Rogers die off screen? Like, he wasn't dead at the end of Endgame. He was old, but he wasn't dead. Like, we knew Chris Evans' contract was up, but Steve wasn't dead. And they keep talking about him, like, you know, Steve is gone and all this. Like, is he? Can you just go visit him at his assisted living center, or did he die off screen? Anyway, Sam donates the shield because he doesn't feel like he can take up the mantle of Captain America. And by the end of the episode, some senator takes the shield out of the Smithsonian and just kind of crowns a new guy Captain America. Like, does he even have the authority to do that? This new government-assigned Captain America is named John Walker, not to be confused with the ex-Panic at the Disco bassist. He's played by Wyatt Russell, who originally actually auditioned to play Steve Rogers in the first Captain America movie, which is pretty funny and, like, good for him for, you know, kind of getting to be Captain America in a way, but he should have been the actual villain of the show. The original Captain America was chosen because he was a good person. This new Captain America was chosen because he's a good soldier. And honestly, when we see his interview and that sort of behind-the-scenes scene, with his friend and his girlfriend or whoever in the locker room before the interview, he doesn't seem like a bad guy or even really a bad choice. I mean, he looks the part, doesn't he? But the original Captain America chose Sam Wilson, and John Walker is starting to crumble under the pressure very quickly. He admits in a private moment with his, I don't think they say sidekick, but it's his friend and his partner who is his sidekick, that the two of them, when they were in Afghanistan, did some things that were not good. And that's never really expanded upon. We don't find out what exactly they did. And honestly, he was probably following orders because he's a good soldier and he's not Steve Rogers. So Walker takes a serum secretly, and the serum takes, whoever you are on the inside and intensifies it. So a good person becomes a great person, bad person becomes an evil person. And now we're going to find out what Walker's got going on the inside. He sees his friend get killed, which is understandably traumatic, but he picks a random flag smasher who was not even responsible and just decides that that was the guy that killed his friend, and he chases him down and publicly beats him to death with the shield. So we get this great shot of him holding the shield that is splattered with the blood of a man he wrongfully murdered. Just mwah, symbolism. In his hands, the shield becomes a weapon. The symbol of the American ideal is splattered with the blood of the innocent. Like, yeah, this guy was a flag smasher, but he didn't kill anybody. When Sam and Bucky try to talk Walker down, he's clearly gone off the deep end. He's yelling all this stuff about how, he's rightfully Captain America and they're trying to take the shield away. They end up having to fight him. He, rips off Sam's wings. It's a whole thing. He's totally lost it. Walker ends up losing the fight, and he has to go to a hearing for his crime that was caught on many, many video cameras. And he doesn't really get in trouble for murder, but he does get stripped of his Captain America title. And he still doesn't quite have it together, and he says, I wrote down the quote, "I only ever did what you asked of me, what you told me to be, and trained me to do, and I did it." And the senator just ignores him and goes on about how he's being discharged and he's going to lose his rank and benefits. And Walker says, "You built me. I am Captain America." And he says this to the senator that gave him the shield and the title. So he's totally right. This is not a Captain America of the people, but it is a Captain America of the government. This is what you get. And it also shows what the American military does to people. And yes, I know that Sam was also in the military. Marvel has shortcomings, that's kind of the point. They don't really follow through on those lines. I mean, at least Sam was willing to commit treason with Steve in Civil War, and Steve joined the army during World War II, so that's different. Where they really dropped the ball is that they basically had Walker get it together and be a good guy again by the next episode. He was even cracking jokes with Bucky, and Bucky does not like this guy. So instead of having him be the, main true antagonist, and the narrative foil to Sam Wilson, who's supposed to be Captain America, they kept the Flag Smashers as the real villain. I feel like you see this a lot in media, especially these days, where the villains have very sympathetic politics, but then they do something that's outrageously evil for no real logical reason based on what their politics are. It's always someone who wants to upset the current system and make the world a better place in a way that's very applicable to real life, but then they make the character just also evil and they murder people in cold blood. So Carly ensures shelter, medicine, food for people who've been displaced, but then she also kills hostages. Remember how I kept throwing around the word propaganda? I saw a post on Tumblr that was the next big Marvel villain is going to be called Kill Worker, and his catchphrase is going to be workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains, and then he's going to say it while he's slitting a child's throat or something. I should do my Spider-Man rant next. I already had all these opinions individually, but I watched a video of Daniel J. Layton talking about his thoughts on the show, and he was the one that said that Walker should have been the main villain as the narrative foil. And I was like, oh, you're so right. He said that if he was writing it, he would have made the Flag Smashers more of a faceless organization and just focused on Walker. But even if they didn't do that, they could have just made the Flag Smashers not terrorists. Like I said before, Sam doesn't really believe that they're wrong, and he has this whole speech at the end about it, but the speech didn't really land for me because it was delivered after Carly was killed. So the dialogue may have supported her points, but the narrative did not. She wasn't martyred for the betterment of her cause, and she didn't give her life to make the world a better place. She was killed so that she could be stopped. She was a villain who was defeated. As far as Sam's speech, we get half a line about how the GRC changed their policies, and no further information. We don't really know what their new policies are. We don't know if it fixed any of the problems. Hopefully it did. But, you know, maybe it's just like, okay, we're not going to, you know, forcibly put people in camps anymore, and then, like, that's it. And they don't really, maybe they don't do anything to actually help the people. Like, if we're going based off of, you know, how government works in real life. I know this was just, like, end of the last episode narrative wrap up. They're like, oh, you know, the good guys win and blah blah blah, but like it feels like a lot of times the superhero will like recognize that the villain has good points, but then they don't actually like do much about it after defeating the villain. If they had made John Walker the true villain and they had the perfect setup for it, they could have just had Carly not continually blow up hostages, and they could have had her get away at the end and continue to help people. Or maybe Sam uses that speech to instead convince the GRC to hear Carly and the Flag Smashers out, and they're able to like work together to come to, you know, a more helpful conclusion, and, you know, Carly can be like, this is what the people need, and then maybe something can actually get done about it. But instead they made the Flag Smashers terrorists, and they killed Carly and the rest of the Flag Smashers, and John Walker went back to being a good guy, cracking jokes with all the other good guys. But when you think about it, isn't the real villain racism? Let's talk about Isaiah Bradley. Isaiah Bradley is evidence of the government sometimes, maybe even often, being the bad guy. So wouldn't it have made sense if the government issue Captain America was also the bad guy? Alright, I'm gonna hang up that point. That's not why I brought Isaiah up. Quick note, the government in real life has done non-consensual experiments on African American men. If you don't believe me, you can look up the Tuskegee study, but just fair warning, it's not a super soldier experiment. Isaiah Bradley tells Sam they're never gonna let a black man be Captain America, and even if they did, no self-respecting black man would want to be. I didn't expect Marvel to get that deep on it, honestly. Like, they had the couple things where, like, the kid called Sam the Black Falcon, and then they had the cops show up when Sam and Bucky were arguing, and they, like, go to Bucky, and they're like, is this guy bothering you, Queen? And I figured that that would be pretty much it. Like, they would keep it at the surface level and be like, we acknowledged it. But this line, I feel like that's probably reflective of a lot of people, the way they actually feel. Now, I cannot really bring my own experience to this. If I was watching something about being transgender, then I could compare it to, you know, my own experiences and be like, yeah, that's a realistic or, you know, an accurate depiction based on my experiences of other people I know. But I have no experience being African American, and I never will. I can only really go based off of, you know, listening to what other people say and sort of applying that to the show. So I don't really know how much I can say about whether or not they, like, executed this well. Like, obviously Sam is going to become Captain America, and because he's the hero, he's basically whatever he does in the end is going to be like, this is right, because he's the hero. But obviously you don't want it to come across as like, get with the times, old man, racism is over. I think they went for more of like, not just accepting this country hates us and that will never change, but, you know, saying like, I'm not going to pretend things are okay just because I want them to be, but I'm still going to, you know, take up the Captain America mantle because it gives me a better opportunity to make positive change in the future. And this works even better in a fictional world than it does in ours. Like, I'm not gonna support the idea of like, you know, for the police, if you have a problem with the police, you can just become a cop and be a good cop and you can like help tip the scales, because that doesn't work. There was a cop in the city near where I live who stopped her partner from choking someone, and she got fired and she had to sue for years to get her pension, and she was a black woman. And that's what happens to good cops. If they either are turned bad by being in a bad system, or they don't get anywhere because they won't play along with the others because they refuse to be a bad cop, or they get fired for being a good cop and not doing their job, or they quit because it sucks so fucking bad. Anyway, and all cops are bastards, right? But Captain America is not a cop. And I do think that this is like a common misinterpretation with the character. Like, when the first Avengers movie came out, I really liked it, but there was something that was sort of nagging at me. I just realized that these straps are like twisted. There was something nagging at me, and I realized eventually that it was the characterization, especially with Captain America, who is a character who, if you can't tell, I really like. In particular, there was the one scene where Tony was like hacking into S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever, and Steve was like, we need to trust them and follow orders. Like, the fuck is this guy? Admittedly, he does go off and, you know, snoop around immediately after that, but the point stands. Steve Rogers commits a crime at least once in every Captain America movie, whether it's just breaking the law or going against orders or full-on committing treason, because he does what's right instead of what's legal. And Captain America does not represent the country as is, he represents what the country should be. America is the fabled land of liberty and justice for all, where there's no cats and the streets are paved with cheese. But that world doesn't exist, and it certainly does not exist in America. So many people here have become disillusioned with this ideal, and that's really what the show is about. But they gave those views to the bad guys, and then they killed the bad guys. Ultimately, that is what it comes down to. Obviously, the events of the show are fictional, but it's basically the government does not take care of all of its citizens, and they take that view and they give it to a terrorist organization. And maybe at first you sympathize because they're right, but then they do all these evil things, so then you are like, oh, they're the bad guys, they need to be stopped. So you take that idea, the government does not take care of all of its citizens, and you associate it with being a supervillain, and then ultimately with getting killed. So I don't want to keep saying that the show is propaganda and Marvel's propaganda, but it is. There's so many random criticisms I could say about the show, and like, don't get me wrong, the show itself is not terrible. Like, I didn't hate it, but once you start trying to think of things to say for a video, it's like, oh, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm gonna save some time and just talk about Bucky, whom I love. I love Bucky as a character. I think his, you know, storyline is really compelling. I just wish that the writers cared about him as much as I do. I wish that he could have one good day with Steve before Steve threw all of his character development and logic out the window and decided to stay in the 1940s. And then apparently die off screen. I once rewatched Civil War and fast-forwarded through all the parts that didn't have Bucky in it. I even named my spiked bat after him. None of this is relevant, I just wanted you to know. Bucky's therapist is not very good. But I mostly want to complain about how they wrapped up that personal storyline about the guy whose son he killed. That was something they set up quite a bit early on, and then they referred back to it a couple times, but then they didn't really show us the resolution. We see Bucky tell the guy, but we don't see how it plays out, so it's not very climactic. It shows Bucky walking by that restaurant that they had been to together earlier, and he sees the guy through the window, and he decides to keep walking, so it's like, did the guy say that he doesn't want to see Bucky anymore? Was he angry? Did it bring him any closure? Did he understand? Because did Bucky explain it beyond what we saw, where he didn't explain very much? Did it bring Bucky closure to be able to cross this off his list? Was it really better if the man didn't know that his son was murdered? Like, obviously, like, his son disappeared, he could assume something bad happened, but it's like, I can tell you exactly how your son died. Is that gonna help the guy? We don't know. We don't know. I feel like I should say something nice. So the scene where Sam and Bucky were walking down the road and then the new government-assigned Captain America team rolls up in their Jeep and they just, like, you know, roll up and stop and, like, open the door, and Sam and Bucky do not even break stride or acknowledge them and just, like, keep walking, and they're just like, okay, and they just have to, like, close the door and, like, slowly drive alongside them so they can talk. That was pretty funny. And when John Walker was getting his ass kicked by the Dora and Sam was like, we should do something, and Bucky just stands there like, looking strong, John, while Io kicks his ass. That was also funny. And Zemo's dance moves were funny, although weird, a little bit secondhand awkward, but mostly funny. Zemo, I don't remember his character very much from Civil War because, as I said, the only time I rewatched it, I fast-forwarded through everything that didn't have Bucky. I did kind of like him in this show. I don't remember if his characterization was inconsistent from Civil War because I don't fucking remember Civil War because I didn't like it enough to rewatch it. So you can like Marvel, they're entertaining, and I'm probably going to continue to watch their shit for some fucking reason. So, you know, just don't let it brainwash you.